this for those. So today we're going to go over sleep. There is quite a lot on sleep, so I'm going to go through it quite quickly. Feel free to type in the chat and interrupt me, should I say, if you want to. I just think it's really important, first of all, to understand why sleep is so important and the things that it does for your brain in particular, as well as your body, so that you can then really understand when we get the DNA sessions through how your genetics impact sleep. And the things that you can start doing to really biohacking and improving it, both now and after you get your results, if that makes sense. And I think it's something that I certainly, as a lawyer, literally neglected for so many years, and I think really contributed to burnout. And as you'll see now, it's so important for your health. So what I'm going to do is share my screen because I have some slides here that I can show you on sleep. So essentially, everyone can see this okay? I want to kind of show you how to sleep like a boss. So I'm going to show you why sleep's important, what a good night's sleep looks like, because the more you can understand and we demystify sleep so that you actually understand what sleep architecture is, which is the way you should be sleeping each night, is really important. And then how you can get a great night's sleep, and also how you can thrive on less sleep. Because regardless of how much you try and optimize your sleep, there are definitely going to be nights when you're working hard, when you've been traveling, and it's just not possible to have a perfect night's sleep every single night. So I want to show you how you can thrive when you've had less sleep, the self-quantification that you can use to track it. And as I say, what to do if you are underslept, and then solve any sleep issues. Really common questions that I get that come up, and also anything you guys have. So first of all, looking at why it's important, these are the conditions that are associated. Overweight, which I've talked about many times because of the way it regulates certain hormones. Inflammation goes up in the body. So we have high levels of chronic inflammation when we're underslept. It disrupts your hormones. It can contribute to chronic diseases, and it impairs your performance. It basically reduces your speed of thinking and your mental clarity. So often we will compromise sleep to save time, but actually it doesn't work for very long, if at all. And also you get much lower energy. So for anyone that's been struggling with their energy, there's an 11% reduction. If you look at exercise, for example, 11% reduction in time to exhaustion just on exercising when you're underslept. And it lowers your immune system significantly, both in terms of your susceptibility to viruses and infections, and also chronic diseases like cancer, but also in relation to vaccination, for example. If you look at people that are vaccinated, if they're poorly slept, they won't take up the vaccine quite so effectively. So your immune system is most active at night. And the most healing is in the first third of the night's sleep. And you'll see how it affects your sleep architecture depending on what time you go to bed in a minute. If you get less than 6 hours a night, that's when you become more susceptible to cold. So if you're somebody who finds that you get lots of colds across winter, you may not be getting enough sleep for you. The sleep that you have prior to your exposure of a virus is important, because that actually affects the degree of your infection rate. And there was a study in 2002 that showed that people who had the flu vaccine who were underslept had less than 50% of the immune reaction. So it's a really, really important thing. If you have a week of short sleeping and you read books like Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, who's one of the world's leading researchers on sleep, those effects can actually last in the body for up to a year. So it's a really, really significant thing. In terms of your risk of chronic diseases, what we see is people that are sleeping 4 hours and less, so kind of staying up working till 3 a.m., then getting back up, which is commonly what I did when I was at Freshfields as a lawyer, is you get a 70% reduction in natural killer cells. And this is actually really important for protecting your long-term immune system and protecting against things like cancer. If you sleep for 6 hours or less, it was associated with a 40% risk of cancer. And actually the World Health Organization has categorized shift work as a potential carcinogen in itself. They found that in a 14-year study, men who were underslept had double the risk of heart attack and 4 times the risk of stroke. And then this is another study in Japan. So it's kind of, there are worldwide studies that have gone on really to show the importance. And as I say, what we see as well in nighttime shift workers is often higher rates, unfortunately, of things like breast cancer. That doesn't happen immediately. So it's not like if you've been underslept for, 2-3 years, it tends to be over sustained poor sleep that happens over sort of a decade or more. The way it affects your metabolism is it actually slows it down because it's really we're really metabolically active during sleep. So as I mentioned yesterday, we see an increase in hunger hormones and a decrease in satiety hormones. And the amount by which you'll be affected by this depends on your genetics in part. So if you have this gene, which is quite rudely called the fatso gene, the FTO, which is the fat mass and obesity gene, of which I have 2 copies. So it definitely doesn't mean that if you have it, you're going to get put on weight at all. It just means there's certain things that you need to control, in particular, as you'll learn in the genetics section, fats in your diet. But this impact of sleep on appetite is more pronounced in people that have this gene. Lack of sleep itself will raise stress levels. So if you're feeling stressed, you can get in this vicious cycle where you can't sleep, but then because you're not sleeping, it's raising your cortisol, and that in turn raises insulin. And what we see is people that are underslept often do gain weight because they start to eat more calories. And so even on, like, if you look at a working week, what the studies will show is that that's about 250 or 252 days a year, you can actually overeat by about 300 calories. A banana's a couple of hundred calories, a large banana. So it's an easy thing to do, and that will contribute to that year-on-year weight gain that people see. When they deprive somebody of sleep completely for 24 hours, they burn about an extra 147 calories. So it's a misconception that because you're up all night, for example, you've got more calorie allowance. You haven't. And that's because of how metabolically demanding sleep itself is. If you have 1 night of sleep deprivation, it's been shown to make you as insulin resistant as a type 2 diabetic. So it has really profound effects on blood sugar. And you can see this study in rats actually was done looking at eating late at night and the impact that has, because the later you eat, often for many people, the poorer the sleep there will be, and certainly their deep sleep is impacted because the body's busy digesting food rather than doing repair work. And this is just from Matthew Walker's book. It shows you that as we've started to compromise on sleep, we've seen a huge rise in obesity. And some of that is absolutely down to what we called SAD, the standard American diet. But sleep seems to have had an impact as well. The brain, as you'll learn in relation to when we look at risk of dementia and things like that, this is really important. So when you have insufficient sleep, there's higher levels of oxidative stress. And this can lead to death of neurons, particularly in the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain. Really important. There isn't confirmed evidence that sleep is a causal factor in Alzheimer's, but what we see is that poor quality sleep definitely precedes the development of Alzheimer's. So it's considered to be a significant lifestyle factor. Your sleep quality tends to deteriorate quite naturally with age, especially deep sleep. So you have to work a bit harder with your sleep hygiene, which I'll go on in a minute, as you get older to really get the same quality. And it's interesting, even like on a free sleep app like Sleep Cycle, for example, if I put that on my children, they'll have amazing levels of deep sleep and just sleep across the night. They're sort of almost perfect. They get these incredible scores. But as you get older, it gets harder. Sabrina asking, if I do a workout at 8 p.m. and sleep at 10:30, should I eat after my workout and what to eat? It's quite difficult if you're working out. I find that at that stage, that's raising body temperature quite significantly. And if you're then eating post-workout, your body won't be digesting food as effectively. So it would be better to really, in reality, to try to move the exercise session earlier, if you're at all able to. And if you're going to eat, I would suggest eating something light. You'll see in a moment when we come to the circadian rhythm what the best times of day for all of these things are. And then I can always come back to that question. So as I say, sleep disturbance precedes Alzheimer's. We have this build-up of beta amyloid plaque and tau proteins that build up, and they kill off the brain cells. And what's important here is where you've got the brain stem, this comes up from the cerebral spinal fluid, comes up and washes and cleanses the brain and actually removes some of this build-off of plaque. And this system's known as the glymphatic system. It's a detoxification system, and it's 10 times as active at night, which is why it's so important to prioritize sleep. Now, in terms of APOE4, which is the gene that is connected to Alzheimer's, most people have 2 copies of APOE3, which puts them at about 9% risk. Some people have, as many as 80 million people in the US have 1 copy of APOE4. including myself. This makes me more concerned about sleep because that will increase risk of Alzheimer's to about 30%. 2 copies increases it much greater. And these are from Dr. Dale Bredesen's book, The End of Alzheimer's, looking at how. Now, the thing is, I say this not to scare you. There are a number of factors that interplay here that he talks about and that we go into in the module in relation to the brain, because really what you want to do is genes don't necessarily ever get expressed. So actually understanding this is really powerful because there are certain biomarkers that you can track and certain nutritional and supplementary modifications you can make that keep these things operating really, really well and lower your risk. And actually the studies that have been done in mice are very, very promising, that even things like curcumin seem to help remove amyloid plaque, lower inflammation, and remove these proteins. So there's more stuff coming out all the time. So it's actually a really, really exciting area. So I think whatever results you have, for me, it felt empowering to know and actually to stop doing what I was doing and make a change. So positive effects. I like this quote by Matt Walker because I actually met him in London a couple of years ago. I think it is the most legal performance enhancing drug, and it's certainly something that athletes really, really do prioritize. It helps to strengthen your immune system. Melatonin itself, which you've probably heard of, people will often try and supplement this when they're traveling. In the UK, it's really only available in prescription, unless you're getting it in microdose, is actually an anti-cancer hormone. So it's quite a powerful hormone. So we want to naturally show the body how to optimize melatonin production. Because rather than taking these things, if you can get your body to make adequate melatonin, it's much better for you in its natural form. And that helps to repair DNA. It helps to lower oxidative stress and inflammation and lower your risk of chronic diseases. It's also anti-aging. So when you hear about beauty sleep, it 100% does exist. Part of this is because there is a release of a hormone known as human growth hormone when you are in deep sleep. And that actually basically replaces the lining of your gut. It does lots of repair work, but it really helps to enhance the health of your skin. And so that's in slow wave sleep that you get more of human growth hormone produced, which is why tracking your sleep and understanding how much deep sleep you're getting per night is really important. And often when I see clients that come to me and we track with like the Aura ring that I'm wearing, initially some of them are getting like 9% of their night in deep sleep. So it's super low and they feel really, really tired a lot of the time as a result. And it has an impact on their skin and on everything else. So this human growth hormone restores the gut lining. Recent evidence shows that actually the lining of your gut is replaced in its entirety about once every 10 days. So it's a really important process as well. It helps preserve muscle mass. Both men and women need testosterone. It helps, and muscle mass in turn helps to improve insulin sensitivity, and sleep helps to improve insulin sensitivity. So it really is like a really good longevity hack. A lot of people also don't realize that sleep deprivation can interfere with the health of your bones as well and reduce bone density and limit the production of new bones. So it's really important as we age that we prioritize it. When you lower stress, which helps when you are sleeping better, it's been shown to balance your microbiome, so your balance of healthy gut bacteria in the gut. And as I say, this human growth hormone renews the lining. And you're going to have much better nutrient absorption, which in turn gives you more energy. So you're going to get better energy from sleep, but you're also going to get better nutrient absorption when the gut is working really efficiently and you've optimized that bacterial balance and you're enhancing nutrient absorption. So it's really important. So essentially a better gut gives you better sleep and better sleep gives you a better gut. You'll also be more productive. You'll have better speed and accuracy. People are better at problem solving. It enhances creativity and actually it reduces the time taken for a task and also reduces errors. And it kind of seems crazy because I think in the medical profession and the legal profession, we are told to compromise sleep so often in the namesake of actually progressing in those careers when actually it's causing issues. So I think that there was a study as well here done by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, and it showed that when you are really underslept, that was equal to binge drinking in terms of your academic performance. And actually, an interesting study I saw as well is that students who drink alcohol the night before an exam or when they've been studying, because of the way it impacts something known as REM sleep, they recall less the next day than people who haven't been drinking alcohol. And alcohol has a big effect on the brain and sleep. This is just some more things to show you about problem solving in terms of like finding hidden rules and that creative thinking, which often you need in leadership roles and also entrepreneurial roles. They're significantly impacted by sleep. Now, REM sleep is the part when you're most likely to dream, and that's the part of sleep that you really want to optimize for your creativity as well. And so I think sleep is the price we pay to feel really good the next day. So then it kind of begs the question of how much sleep do you need? And this is very individual. So you'll see when you get your genetic reports that you'll fall into the category of being somebody who needs less than 7 hours, who needs 7 to 9 hours, or who needs 9 hours plus. There's a massive difference in terms of the length of your day if you're somebody who needs less than 7 versus someone who needs 9. Most people tend to fall within 7 to 9 hours. Once you go over 9 hours, there have been studies that show that it's actually correlated with more deleterious health outcomes. But then under 6 hours has also been correlated. So you really want to be aiming that 7 to 8 hours that gets banded around. There's good evidence that it is supportive. However, there is a study that shows that people that got 6.5 hours were the healthiest. And it's quite an interesting study because really and you'll see it in a moment, it actually is down to the way those people were living their lives. They needed less sleep because they actually needed less repair because their health was so optimal. And so that's why everything that you're learning on this program will optimize your health and may in turn then help to reduce the need for sleep. This is what a good night's sleep looks like, somewhere around 7 hours. It would be 5 full sleep cycles. For people who are struggling with that with work, then Nick Littlehales is the guy that's probably done the most work on this. He worked with the England football team for many years, and when they were traveling, he actually started to optimize their sleep cycles across the week, so to make sure that they were getting enough in. If you're going to take a nap, you want to take a nap for either 10 to 20 minutes, which will give you a boost, or you need to slip into a full sleep cycle and get a 90-minute nap. You're going to feel groggy when you get that sort of 30 to 45-minute nap because you start to slip into a full cycle that you can't complete. In terms of what you're looking at numbers-wise, you really want to be getting at least 60 minutes of deep sleep, ideally, and nudging up to that in the night. So it's around 15 to 20%. And then REM sleep is actually a bit more. And it's quite interesting because you'll see that when you deprive individuals of REM sleep, they actually die quite quickly. So it's very, very important. It helps with emotional regulation as well as creativity. It helps you form new neural connections. It's when you're most likely to dream. When we talk about people overcoming difficulties that they've been and painful memories, grief, for example, we say that time is a great healer. It's actually REM sleep that is a great healer. Then non-REM sleep helps to prune different memories and clean the brain out, moving things from short term to long term. It helps to recalibrate things like blood pressure, puts you in a more parasympathetic sleep, and that non-REM sleep will comprise of both deep sleep and light sleep. So light sleep is also really important. You shouldn't think that light sleep is irrelevant. It isn't, and most of the night actually is going to be spent in light sleep. But this is from Aura that you can see, and lots of hormones are released. Adenopectin is helping you burn fat. Leptin obviously is satiety. Got human growth hormone with repair, melatonin, testosterone. Those are just some of the ones that are being released. But this here, what I've put here is just to show you the brain waves that you are dropping down into as you go into sleep. So as you come into deep sleep, you'll see that the deep sleep predominates the early part of the night. And then as you come out into this section of the night, you have more rapid eye movement sleep, which is here. So, and you have what's known as these sleep spindles, which are actually really important for repair work in the brain. But when you're awake here, like now, when you're concentrating, your brain waves are in a high beta state. And as you if you do things like meditation, for example, you start to relax, you do some breath work, you'll move that brainwave state, you'll slow it down from alpha into theta brainwaves. Theta brainwaves is what we see predominating in young children, and you'll find that they're highly impressionable. They'll believe anything that you say. If you say to a 4-year-old that Father Christmas has just turned up at the door, they're going to believe you. And that's why when we were talking about like mindset and developing the habits and the beliefs that you want, often we're so vulnerable, these beliefs have been implanted so early, but we can access these when we go into this more sort of meditative state. And then when you get into deep sleep, you start to move into delta brainwaves, and this is where the real repair work happens. What I often see in clients who are not relaxed is they'll come down here, they'll go into deep sleep, and then they shoot up and they overshoot this rapid eye movement in the beginning of the night and spike up here and they wake up. And if they wake up here, they can then struggle to go back to sleep. So that's the classic, you wake up at 2, 3 in the morning and you can't fall back asleep. And if you get sometimes that can happen because of blood sugar dysregulation. So your blood sugar drops really low, and then cortisol and adrenaline are released to put sugar back in the blood. But that release of cortisol will actually wake you up. And it can be hard to go back to sleep. And other times it is just being overstressed. So the first half, as I say, is more deep sleep. The second half is more REM sleep. If you have 5 to 6 hours, you're likely to miss out on quite a lot of the REM sleep. So in that second half where we're seeing more rapid eye movement, because you're shortening that sleep phase, you might get deep sleep, but it can make you more vulnerable to mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. If you're someone that goes to bed really early, you'll tend to have more deep sleep. And if you're someone who's a really late sleeper, you might have more REM sleep just because of the way the night, our circadian rhythm functions. If you're having a sleepless night, as I say, the likelihood is you've got this high brainwave state. And so your mind's constantly turning things over and thinking. They've done some work that looks at this ratio between the delta brainwaves, which are when you're in deep sleep, and the beta brainwaves, which is when you're really awake. And a high beta seems to predict worse cardiovascular outcomes. So actually all of the things that you do that we're going to go over in a minute that help you relax and drop down those brainwave states are really protecting your cardiovascular health and your sleep. And so if you have less deep sleep, likelihood is that you are having higher brainwave activity. And sleep actually resets all that cardiovascular tone, including optimizing blood vessels, particularly if you're breathing nasally. So when you breathe nasally, we have nitric oxide released, which opens up and dilates the blood vessels and you get more oxygen. When you're having enough REM sleep, if you track it, for those of you that have Oura rings or Whoop straps, you'll see that your heart rate variability increases, which shows that you've got a good communication between your sympathetic, which is your dominant system, and your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. When we deprive people, so if you deprive someone of food, they will survive for anywhere between 30 and 350 days. There was a study done on a guy who was extremely overweight, and they gave him vitamins and minerals. Obviously, he would need those and hydration, and he was able to live a full year. He did obviously burn a significant amount of fat in that process, but it's possible to stay alive as long as you've got nutrients going in. When they sleep deprive, you can't do this in humans. It's not, it's against the law. But when you sleep deprive rats, now they have shorter lives, so you've obviously got to balance this out, but they will be, if you totally deprive them of sleep, they'll die within 9 or 10 days. And if you totally deprive them of REM sleep, so they keep waking them up every time they're going into that part of sleep, then, and that just gives a slight total sleep reduction, again, they will die within 9 to 10 days. Whereas the non-REM sleep, which includes deep sleep, you can actually last 20 days. And so it just shows you how important this REM sleep really is. So does anyone have any questions on that before I kind of cover how you can thrive on less sleep? No? Can't see, okay. So there was a study, as I said earlier, done on, and it took a long time to correlate, and it was because it was done on 1 million adults. And initially they couldn't pull all this data together until we had the advancements in computer science to be able to do that. And what they found, they were correlating sleep and mortality rates. And they found that 6.5 hours was correlated with the longest lived. That seems to be, looking at the study, to do with the healthy lifestyle that these individuals had, as opposed to us advocating that 6.5 is enough. However, I know that, me included, a lot of people find it hard to sleep more than 6.5 to 7 hours a night. And what I would say to you is, this is why optimizing other areas of your health becomes so important, because it can be so health protective. In actual fact, if you're keeping inflammation low, if you're controlling your blood sugar, if you're getting fresh air, access to natural light, you've got optimum levels of things like vitamin D, there's less repair work. And they didn't have chronic illnesses, they had low inflammation and low stress. So those are kind of the modifiable factors you want to look at. One thing is, in terms of you getting a good night's sleep, is behind your eye is the master clock. So when we look at your genetics in terms of whether you are an early person or a night owl, we're looking at the clock genes, and the clock genes are contained in every organ in your body, but the master controlling everything is the SCN, which is behind the eye. Now, you also have light receptors all over your body. So if the room is not fully dark, you may find that you could have a sleep mask on, that you've used blackout blinds, but you're still not sleeping that well. That's because you have light receptors on your skin. So getting the room really dark is really, really important to actually sleeping really well. There was a study done on people who were looking at their mobile phone in bed, and what they found is that it actually delayed the liver detoxification in the night. Because of this, SCN is then communicating to the clocks, and obviously the liver has its own clock gene. So just being careful with blue light at night is going to be really important. And there is a link between overexposure to junk light and lots of metabolic diseases. And again, we really do see people who are struggling with their with shift work. They find it very hard to control their weight very often. And part of that is because they don't feel they can exercise well as well. So some of the tips you can do is, when you get up near the sun, it actually prepares your skin for the day. So in warmer weather in summer, going out in the early morning light sets your circadian rhythm, but it also actually helps to build up your natural defense against UV light. So getting outside is important. Ideally, you want to expose your skin for a certain period, a short period without sunscreen. Because that can help to synthesize vitamin D. And when you're in cold weather, the cooling effect actually can enhance light simulation. So actually even just exposing skin in the cold is good as well. And in summer, it helps produce more melanin, which is protective. You want to wear blue light blockers in the evening. So there are some kind of cheap pairs from China that don't block out much light. So I would always say to invest in a good quality pair. Ra Optics is a really great brand in the US. Red Light Rising do some great blockers over here in the UK. I know the guys at both these companies, so if anyone wants discount codes, you can message me or I can put it in the chat. On your computers, you can download Efflux software, which will limit that blue light. It's quite interesting. I just interviewed Dr. Jen Haley again, who's a dermatologist. And we were talking on my last podcast, which you can go back and listen to, about the importance of wearing sunscreen, even like all year round, for protecting your collagen in your skin, but also when you're in front of your computer, because the lights that are coming from the computer screen are damaging to your skin as well. You can, like lighting candles, firelight, all of those things are simulating that sunset and that ancestral practices we would have had, and they will help to encourage melatonin. Whereas if you've got big blue lights coming in through the retina, it's going to be much, much harder for you to go to sleep. And obviously, if people have got these big TV screens, which is why I would say keep your television, your bedroom should literally be used for sleep and sex and nothing else. You can read, obviously, but not for things like TV or anything that has bright lights. And if you can avoid electronic devices for 1 to 2 hours before bed, it's going to be better. If not, I would just encourage you to put blue blockers on. You can use red light, and we'll talk about this, and you've got the 5 biohacks course where I talk about the benefits of red light therapy. You can have this in the background to help, particularly if you're working late, to offset any blue light. And this is really the end of the spectrum that we can see, but it's really, really good for your mitochondria, which are the energy powerhouses of your cells. The infrared element you can feel the warmth of, but you can't see it. But these are really good, these light spectrums, which is what you see in the sun in sunrise and sunset for lowering inflammation. But they also help to increase nitric oxide, which is really good for blood vessel health. Just as an aside, we'll talk about this later, but there is this fourth phase of water that's been found by Dr. Gerald Pollack. So we usually think of ice, running water, and steam. There is a fourth phase called easy water, and exclusion water is in your cells, and it's like a gel-like substance, and it's highly charged in terms of energy. You'll actually see it formed in certain foods, so like cucumbers, watermelon. But if you put chia seeds in a pot, that gel structure that you're creating, that's actually easy water, and it's really, really energy enhancing for your cells and for your mitochondrial function. And because we are so predominantly water, when we access red light or we go in the sun, we're actually charging our cells. When you bounce up and down and you vibrate water, you also create and generate more easy water. So that's a kind of hack that you can do on a daily basis that helps with energy production. So tracking wise, you can see here, this was something I did a year ago. I've done it again more recently, but this is like an overnight graph of my blood glucose. And what you'll see, the levels go up quite significantly when I have a poor night's sleep. So it's kind of like around here. And then when I don't sleep well, it goes up much more after food, but also in a fasted state in the morning, and climbs much more quickly in response to cortisol. This is looking at like my Oura ring. So you can see here a poor night's sleep. You'll get very low scores of REM and deep sleep. And this is where it's taking me longer to fall asleep, contrasted where an 8-hour sleep where you're getting really robust levels of both deep sleep and REM sleep. And it'll give you a much, much higher score. And so I do recommend tracking because it's the best way to really get a good idea of what's going on. And you'll see correlation between heart rate variability, because here it's this is the variation between my heartbeats, and it's much more depressed here, below 20. This is under recovering, when you've really, really been pushing yourself too hard, and you see that depression in heart rate variability. So these are all things that as we go through the program, you'll learn about, but these are the key apps that I recommend. Apple Watch doesn't really measure HRV quite so well, but you can use it to measure sleep. The Oura, the Whoop, and the BioStrap are looking more at blood volume, and so they're more accurate in the way that they measure these things. The other thing as well is, like, if someone that snores, or your partner does, or you struggle with things like sleep apnea, you can check your oxygen saturation. Actually, sleeping on your right side tends to increase blood flow and reduce snoring. So that can help, but often with learning to breathe nasally is really important because of this nitric oxide production. That's really important, and actually getting things like sleep apnea under control is important. I've done a couple of podcasts with Patrick McEwen that are really good on this and how to really optimize your breathing. The biggest mistakes, no guess here that alcohol is one of them. This is what happens when you have alcohol. So we all know somebody who went out and had too many drinks and couldn't remember what happened the night before. And when that happens, it's because alcohol is really compromising REM sleep. And so you actually just don't produce those memories. So you can see here that, healthy night's sleep, as I showed you before, you're kind of coming out, going back down, and then you're having more REM sleep here, and you've got less deep sleep. When you have alcohol, it pushes you down into a very deep sleep very quickly. And often people are going to bed quite late, so they often won't even pick this bit up. And so they don't form memories properly. So it will impact things like learning, but in extreme examples, it means you don't remember what happened the night before because the memories were never formed because you missed out on this part of sleep. Eating late raises your heart rate. Exercising late, that's why I was saying in response to Sabrina's great question there, is ideally you wouldn't be exercising late in the evening and eating late, because your body it's going to elevate body temperature, and we need a cool body temperature to sleep well. It's also your body's going to be busy digesting food if you've eaten late. The other thing that happens is if you're having carbohydrates in the evening, late at night, this is not a problem. 3 hours or so before bed, carbohydrates will actually help you to sleep. However, if you're having carbohydrates right before bed, you're going to have an insulin response. And insulin, human growth hormone, is not released in the quantities that we want when we've got the presence of insulin. Now, as you get 40 plus, the only real time that you're producing growth hormone is when you're asleep. So it's really, really important as you get older that you get this, you use intermittent fasting and you get this break, because you're going to produce more growth hormone, which is going to repair your system and also helps you to look younger. If you eat late, it contributes to things like stress and oxidative stress. Social jet lag is also an important one. So this is where people are really good all week and then they kind of trash it at the weekend by going out late and then sleeping in. What Matthew Walker actually would advocate, and many of the sleep researchers, is that if you've had a late night, you still try to wake up at the same time. That might be that you lie in bed and you read, you look at the newspaper, whatever it is, you go get some breakfast, come back to bed, and you take a nap later in the day, but you actually keep your wake up time fairly consistent. Because when you have a big night on a Saturday night and you don't do that, it can actually take you to a sort of Wednesday, Thursday to catch up. You're just back on track, and then you go and do the same thing again. So the time that you wake up is really important to this rhythm. And social jet lag, again, has been linked to cardiovascular disease, but it also lowers your mood. The blue light, which you can see here, it looks pretty awful, does disrupt cortisol and melatonin. And that's because of, as I've already explained, this master clock behind the brain, behind the eye, it's the front of the brain. And then we've talked about this. Watching TV stimulating, so I say put blue light blocking glasses. Now, if you miss the window, this is also important. So as you're going through the evening, around 9 to 10 o'clock at night, melatonin starts to get produced. As you now know, that's an antioxidant hormone, it's anti-cancer. However, it is about to initiate a really big repair process in the body. And because it's about to do that, it's increasing energy levels with the body. So if you miss that window with your circadian rhythm of when to go to sleep, this can be one of the biggest reasons you can't sleep, is you develop what's known as the second wind. And that's in response to you missing this cue. So now you feel like you want to party, like this toddler and my children used to do when they were younger, and that you actually want that rise in energy to be used to strengthen and repair and rejuvenate your system, not to wake you up. So it's important to get that timing right. The other thing that's worth mentioning is EMF. So I always say to people, turn off your Wi-Fi at night. Children absorb way more EMF. They have thinner skulls. So it's really important, if you've got kids in the house, turn off your mobile phone, because airplane doesn't work properly on a lot of phones. And so when you power down, the more you start to do that, the better you will feel the next day. And we've been doing it for a number of years. And recently, my father's been seriously ill in hospital, and I was keeping the Wi-Fi on to speak to my mum in case of emergencies. And my kids could tell after about a week, they were like, I really don't feel like I'm sleeping well. And you become more sensitive to what you're exposed to the more you reduce those stressors. And again, the World Health Organization has categorized cell phone radiation as a carcinogen. And it's very quick in the way it triggers oxidative stress. So definitely turn it off at night. Also, what the study shows, when we were looking at those brainwave patterns, and we want to drop down from beta through alpha, theta into delta, the EMF can actually stop and disrupt that. So if you're struggling to sleep, EMF can be quite a big contributing factor. Caffeine's also another one. And again, when you look at your genetics, you'll see your sensitivity to caffeine. Some people are slow metabolizers, some people are fast metabolizers. Generally, the half-life of caffeine is about 6 hours. So if you're having caffeine at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, at 10 o'clock at night, half that caffeine is still going to be left in your system. So I would always say try to limit it after 12 to 2. You do get it in chocolate. But chocolate has other things like magnesium that can help you to sleep. I just wouldn't overdo dark chocolate in the evening. And genetics definitely play a part here, both in terms of the speed at which you metabolize it, but also your receptors. Because what happens is your caffeine is basically attaching onto adenosine receptors. And so it stops your brain recognizing this buildup of adenosine. And adenosine is the substance that creates what's called sleep pressure and makes you feel like you want to go to sleep. So the more adenosine that builds up, the more tired you feel. But caffeine, it locks into those receptors, so you're not aware of it building up. So how to biohack your sleep? In terms of deep sleep, these are the things that make the biggest difference for deep sleep. You can screenshot these if it's helpful. If you want to like remember them, feel free to screenshot. So you want to eat light. I do recommend carbs in the evening. I actually think that some slow burning carbs, like sweet potato, can really help you to sleep better. And there's quite a bit of research on that. Try to keep 3 to 4 hours before bed without food, and block your blue light, whether that's with blue light blocking glasses or physically not looking at screens for 90 minutes to 2 hours before bed. And then for REM sleep, again, it's to do with eating. Alcohol's the biggest thing for REM sleep. Lion's mane can help. The thing with lion's mane to be careful about is for some people, it really, it increases REM sleep. I've tracked it myself, and it is more anecdotal than scientifically proven yet. However, a lot of people I've spoken to recently in the industry and clients find that if they have lion's mane too close to bed, they feel like it really keeps them awake. So they do get more dreaming, but it feels like that keeps them awake. However, there is very promising research in relation to nerve growth factor in the brain and connection between neurons and protecting potentially against things like cognitive decline and dementia with lion's mane. But it might be that for you, you're better off taking lion's mane in the morning than taking it before bed. So you can use this. This is a science-backed formula to optimize a night's sleep, and it's called the 10-3-2-1-0. So 10 hours before you stop drinking caffeine. If you turn out to be a slow or you're very sensitive metabolizer on your genetic report, then you would leave longer, more like 12 hours. 3 hours before you stop eating and drinking. 2 hours, I would say, to stop working and wear blue light blockers. And then 1 hour before you can try and really wind down with more meditative practices, breath work, gratitude, reading, things that really engage that parasympathetic nervous system. And 0 should be the number of times that you hit the snooze button. The reason for this is that when you hit the snooze button, you're very unlikely to go into a full sleep cycle because you'll have it set to about 10 minutes, which means that you begin to go back into a sleep cycle and then it wakes you up and jolts you. And that is not good for cardiovascular health, that it just snaps you out of the sleep. And people often will repeatedly do that in the morning. The other thing is you're going to feel a lot groggier because your brain's trying to slip into a sleep cycle and you're not able to fulfill it. So these are kind of the do's and don'ts. You can screenshot this. You want to try and go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. Always bookend, so kind of write down and get out of your head everything and that you've done that you need to do the next day. I would get outside earlier. So the earlier you go outside, the better you're going to sleep that night. So your sleep tonight begins with what you did in the morning. Genetically, you'll find out your chronotype. We've talked about EMF. Hot and cold showers. Some people find cold showers are better because it cools the body. Some people find that when they have a warm bath, it heats the body up and then there's like this thermal dump and they sleep better. Whichever works best for you, is the idea is that you are cooling the body because the body needs to be cooled to sleep properly. The things that you don't want to do is you don't want to sleep in at weekends. As I say, try to get up within an hour of your normal waking time. Stop alcohol significantly before bed. So like 3 hours before bed, you want to not drink alcohol. Limit caffeine to earlier in the day and don't check things like your phone or have any tiny blue lights. So like if you're traveling, you can take a bit of tape to put over, because often in hotels, they'll have alarm clocks, and don't snooze the alarm. Your bedroom, as I say, should be for sleep and sex. I do recommend blackout blinds. And this is the kind of temperature. Now, a lot of people do find this too cold. This is what they recommend as well for babies, but you don't want to be too hot. And this is a really common thing for women in the later stages of perimenopause as well, is that they have less body temperature regulation. And so looking at why that's happening so you can cool your body, and using things like adaptogens like holy basil, ashwagandha, or getting hormone replacement therapy can be helpful. You can use something known as the chili pad, which is a mattress cooling device if you get very hot. It is quite noisy. You can also use earthing sheets, which many people do say they get the benefits from EMF, but I would try to keep electronics out of the bedroom as much as you can. Your chronobiology is a really interesting area. Dr. Michael Breus wrote a great book called The Power of When, and he categorized people, and you'll see this in your genetics. The lions are the early risers. Most people fall within this category. They're the intermediate type, and he calls them bears. So that would be your classic kind of 10 till 6 type sleeper. And then the wolves are the night owls. And then you do have, unfortunately, this category, and I do see it on genetic reports, of what he calls the dolphins, who have to be a lot more careful. They're more vulnerable to insomnia. And he's theorized that this happens because when we were outside, not in protective, comfortable houses, we would have needed people awake at different times to protect the camp. But as I say, you'll find out what your chronotype is with your genetic test. You can also do his quiz online, and this is what you'll see on your DNA test. This is a screenshot of mine, and then as you scroll through the app, you'll be able to see what genes they've tested and what the recommended advice are for you in each area. And so, you know, for me, I'm a morning person, don't need a lot of sleep. I really struggle with light sleep and get woken very easily. But this we'll go into in future modules. This is really down to something called the COMT gene and the way you process dopamine. And if you process it more quickly, you may not have the same perception of pressure and urgency and stress. And so being on this side, I have to kind of create deadlines to get things done and put pressure. Whereas someone over here, there's been a lot of work with the military who's more vulnerable to PTSD, for example, and has a higher perception of stress. So this will show you where you need to focus, and there's more information in the app. This is how your circadian clock works. So obviously that genetics will impact this a little bit. So for your early morning person, things are going to happen a little bit earlier in the day, and for your night owl, it's going to be a little bit later. So this would be typically the bear within Michael Bruce's, or the intermediate within your genetic report. And so this is why I say here, it's quite important that you do start winding down by this time, because otherwise that's when you're going to hit that second wind and find that you can't sleep. Exercise wise, you've got best coordination, reaction time, greater cardiovascular efficiency in the afternoon. For me, I find this really difficult time to exercise. And if it isn't done before noon, maybe because I'm such an early morning person, I'm usually up regardless by about 5. Exercise just wouldn't happen for me if I did it at this part of the day. Very rare. So I do tend to do it in the morning. However, the results, I don't think anyone's ever broken an Olympic world record before midday. So there are certain things that we do really are optimized by the rise and fall of the sun. This melatonin induces tiredness. To make melatonin, you've got to have enough serotonin. So your mood's important here, and 95% of that is made in the gut. So that's about making sure that you are eating a healthy diet. We'll go into like the polyphenols and things that affect your microbiome, but that in turn affects your melatonin, because there's a process known as methylation, which converts serotonin to melatonin. Now, cortisol and melatonin have got an inverse relationship. So when you feel stressed and you can't sleep, this is partly why. Because when cortisol is high, melatonin is very low. And when we look at things like salivary cortisol response and Dutch testing and looking at people's melatonin and cortisol levels, we can see if something's gone awry. But that you want to use that rhythm of the sun and your exposure to light and food. Those are the two biggest cues you have, is when you eat and when you see light, that will help to inform this rhythm. So I always say try and set a finished work time. Separate things and bookend your day and get things out of your head on paper. It will help you sleep. Gratitude we'll talk about another time. It's a really powerful science-backed practice. You can use these sorts of things, retimer glasses, if you're traveling. Now people are traveling more. That can help to get you in the new time zone. But if also with jet lag, just getting outside and actually grounding and putting your bare feet onto the mud or the sand or the grass really helps to offset the static charge and helps you to sleep better. And these blue light blocking glasses work really well with sleep as well, with kids, sorry. If you're underslept, these are the things I would say to do. This is when fasting can help, because when you go into a state of mild ketosis, it enhances brain function. So it's going to actually keep your energy more steady. So your natural instinct might be, I feel really hungry, but if you start eating carb heavy foods when you're underslept, you're probably going to crave them pretty much all day. And so there's been a lot of work done by Dr. Sachin Panda around intermittent fasting. If you're struggling to sleep at night actually fasting for longer is not going to be as good for you. You want to do time restricted eating. So I always say to people, do a minimum of 12 hours. But what his research shows is that for people that are then struggling to sleep, you want to bring that fasting window much earlier in the day. So actually having breakfast, do you remember saying there's two cues? There's the sunlight and any light, and food. You would actually bring breakfast forward earlier in the day, get natural light outside. That's going to help you fall asleep earlier. So you can actually shift your circadian rhythm by doing that. Bulletproof coffee is quite a good one if you're underslept. That actually contains easy water, this charged water that we're talking about, because when you blend fats and water together, you get that produced. So like a little bit of C8 MCT oil, you can even drop some lion's mane into it, can be a really good way of waking you up when you're underslept. And then as soon as you go outside, you stop that melatonin release. So this is another thing you can use in the afternoon if you're sleepy, is by going out in the sun, you can actually, after lunch, you get a little bit of melatonin released, and that's why people can feel that postprandial dip. If you go for a walk outside, you can actually stop that. And then these are the kind of nootropics that can help you. But again, we'll go into that all on Brain, because otherwise it's going to be too much for you today. But creatine's got some really good research around undoing some of the effects for people that are underslept. You can also take a nap in the afternoon, but you don't want to go into a full sleep cycle. That can impact your sleep the following night. But what you can do is like have an espresso and then have a 20-minute nap. And then by the time you wake up, the espresso's kicking in. The ways to limit that postprandial dip after lunch is to manage your blood sugar. So I find with a lot of clients, the minute they remove carbs at lunch, the better they feel with sustained energy all day. So actually going for higher protein, fattier foods in the early part of the day can be better. And then, as I say, going outside can help. Meditation also helps. In terms of calming your nervous system, exercise excites your nervous system. So it speeds up your metabolic rate, which is why we don't want to do it in the evening. And it releases endorphins, which is all amazing because it has boosts for serotonin. But meditation works in a different pathway. So it actually helps you access a fourth state of consciousness. So it's different from your waking, sleeping, or dreaming state. So I was having this conversation on a couple of podcasts I've done with Emily Fletcher. And she's the author of Stress Less, Accomplish More, and founder of Ziva Meditation. She talks about how exercise burns off stress in the moment, but if you really want to burn off a backlog of stress, then meditation is the best way. So if you think that your sleep is affected because you're so stressed, introducing a meditation practice can be really good. And there's a form of meditation that she practices called Vedic meditation, which I love. And this has been shown to be 2 times deeper than deep sleep in terms of the rest for your body in this fourth phase state that you go in. And this is very much what transcendental meditation is based around. So it's where you use a mantra and you recite that mantra to just bring your thoughts back. It works because of the way this type of meditation charges your system. It's actually a really good thing to do in the morning pre-exercise because it will make your exercise session more intense. You're going to have more energy. Apart from yoga, because yoga itself is designed to prepare the body for meditation. So that's the time that I would swap that around. But it is a great stress reliever. It's kind of a productivity hack. She's taught it in companies like Google. It works super well if you can do it. It's 20 minutes a day, basically, and twice a day in an ideal world. And that's been shown to be, so it's a good lunchtime hack if you're feeling really tired, is to do this mantra-based meditation for 20 minutes. It actually helps you to hold more things in your awareness. So in the same way we're talking about the brain and sleep and how it improves cognition, so does meditation. And it strengthens the band of fibers called the corpus callosum, which go down the center of the brain and connects your right and left hemispheres. So it is a real performance hack as well. And so it can be used to improve sleep. So a consistent meditation or a consistent breathwork practice can help to improve sleep, but we'll be doing those in other sessions just because it's too much. But if you wanted to try this, her technique involves mindfulness for 1 to 2 minutes where you center your breath and then you move into a meditation, which she's found the optimal time is about 14 minutes. If you haven't done mantra form meditation, she recommends using one. And the key thing is to let the thoughts go in and out. So your job is to be the guest at the party, not the bouncer. So you don't need to critique those thoughts. You just need to allow them to flow in and out. As like you can use Swaha, which I think is surrender, and different ones when you get sort of more into it. And then you sort of manifest what you want. And she's got really good free resources here if you ever wanted to look at them. The supplements that can help you are magnesium. Magnesium production or utilization to use energy peaks at midday. So often people find it better to take it morning and night because it will, if you use glycinate, it will help to enhance sleep at night. 3-8, magnesium 3-8. This is just where they've basically attached magnesium to a type of amino acid, and the amino acid it's attached to has different effects in the body. So when we attach magnesium with glycine, you get magnesium glycinate, that helps you sleep. When you attach it to it's magnesium 3-8, it can help with brain function. But you can take it twice a day. If you take that one in the morning, it helps with cognition and concentration. I really like Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. I just recorded another podcast. It's out today with Wade Lightheart. I think his company's brilliant. It's got 7 different types that he's put in there. You'll know if you've taken too much magnesium because you can end up with disaster pants, because it really is, you can take it to bowel tolerance basically. If you're having intolerances or you've been out for like a really kind of junky meal where you're struggling, taking charcoal, activated charcoal from coconut shell at the time of eating can help to offset some of that, because it basically draws toxins out of the body so you sleep better. So that can help you, but you need to take it quite close to when you've consumed that. You mustn't take it next to medication because it will just pull that out of your system as well. The other things are medicinal mushrooms. So as I say, lion's mane, some people wakes them up a bit too much, but there's really promising research with BDNF and nerve growth factor. I find the Bioptimizers magnesium with a tincture of chaga and reishi really, really helps me to sleep. You can microdose melatonin. A lot of people take too much, just small doses, as little as 0.3 milligrams is enough. The master antioxidant in your body, and again, you'll see in your DNA how well you produce this one, is glutathione. Often the limiting factor is N-acetylcysteine, so that can actually help before bed. It's also shown in research to help with lung function. And then B6, B9 and zinc help to enhance melatonin production as well. Vitamin D status is also important, so getting lots of access to the sun. And then omega-3 has been shown to enhance that lymphatic system that we were talking about that washes the brain. So omega-3 is really good. Omega-3 also helps the myelin sheath around the nerve cells, so it helps with connectivity and it lowers inflammation. And most people have their omega-3/6 ratio is off just because omega-6 is in so many foods. And then things like CBD as well. GABA is quite calming. And then if you struggle to wake up in the morning, just to finish off, sometimes that's low blood pressure. So you can have on your bedstand a glass of water and just sprinkle a bit of Celtic sea salt or something like E-Light by Body Bio is trace minerals. That can actually help you, and that will kickstart that adrenaline and cortisol process and mineralize your body without caffeine. And getting water in before you have caffeine is important, especially if caffeine depletes the body of salts. So you can try that. If you're waking up at night, having some honey, raw honey has been shown to be good. So you could try a teaspoon of raw honey before bed. You can mix that with ketones and some collagen if you want to, if you're someone that gets a bit peckish, and see just how that affects your sleep. And then, as I say, having some carbs at dinner can help. But some people will wake up because of electrical surges from power grids and things. And that's why I say trying to keep as many electricals off at night is also important. I did have some questions in here, but I think it's quite long. We've just gone over the hour. So I thought I'll start there and see what your questions are, because it's quite a lot to canter through. Does anyone have any questions or any sleep problems that they're particularly struggling with at the moment? No. Doesn't sound like. Okay. So I'll put the recording of this anyway if you want to go back and watch it, because I know there's quite a bit in there. But the critical things that I want you to take away is to really get that light rhythm sorted and your fasting rhythm. Shamina, you've got a question.
Yeah, just quickly. So my sleep is quite good. When I go to sleep, I feel pretty rested when I wake up. I don't wake up in the middle of the night. I sleep all the way through. I wake up when my alarm goes off. I've heard that thing about not snoozing your the clock, the alarm clock when it goes off. So that's all good. But my issue is that I don't sleep enough. And the reason I don't sleep enough is because I don't get to bed early enough. And the reason because of that, and especially because of the, what we've all gone through with the pandemic and lockdown and everything, is that after I finished work, I feel like, well, I haven't been able to go out. I haven't been able to do this, that, and the other. I'll stay on the internet. I'll be watching Netflix. And I know I should be going to sleep, but I think it's more of a mindset thing than a medical thing, getting to bed early enough to have longer sleep. When I do sleep, it's fine. I have no issues with getting up or anything, but it's just going to bed early enough.
Yeah, and it might be that you are more of a night owl, right, as well. That could be playing a part. So it'd be interesting to see what your genetic report shows, because sometimes if you then try to really force yourself to go to bed too early, it's going to be hard to fall asleep. In terms of when you finish work, do you have like a regular cutoff time, or are you having often to work up and it's sort of nudging up towards your bedtime?
Yeah, so towards the end of the quarter, so in December, this will be happening. I'll probably be finishing about 8, 9 o'clock. But other than that, it's pretty much 9 till 5, 9 till 6.
Okay, so that's quite good. And what time are you actually going to bed?
Well, last night, for example, I went to bed about 11:30.
Okay. And did you then fall asleep straight away?
Yeah, pretty much within 20 minutes, yeah.
And what time did your alarm come on?
7:45.
See, in actual fact, though, you're actually getting a really good night's sleep in terms of the duration. If you look at like 11:30 to 7:30 effectively, then you're getting a really solid 8 hours. The time that I would be looking at you changing things is if, for example, we found, I suppose, well, one question before we look at the genetic side, is your energy levels, are they impacted during the day?
In the morning, I feel very sluggish. And then after lunch, I feel okay. But in the morning, it feels like it does take me a while to, get into the day.
Okay. And are you someone that has ever struggled with low blood pressure?
No.
No, you haven't.
The weight round, yeah.
Yeah. But would you say that you've been through a sustained period of stress as a result of the pandemic, like everyone else, everyone pretty much has?
Yeah, it hasn't been too bad. I go through stages of going to sleep quite late. Then I pull it back to about, 11:30, 11 o'clock. And then other times it'll be like 2 o'clock. But generally it's around between 11 and midnight. I'll try and be in bed.
Okay. So the biggest thing is the consistency. So finding a time that works for you, because that when you're stretching it to sort of 2, that makes it more difficult in terms of optimizing all of the functions that are going on in the body. If you're watching things like Netflix, you'll naturally feel like going to bed later because you've got a lot of artificial light exposure. That's it's basically like artificially making everything later, even if you weren't more of a night owl, if that makes sense. But then having that relaxation is also important. If you're getting a really solid 8 hours per night, it isn't such an issue. You could then start to track it to see, actually, like sometimes clients of mine are quite surprised when they track it with something like an Aura, that actually they're not getting as much deep sleep as they thought, or as much REM sleep as they thought. So if you wanted to kind of really optimize it further, then I definitely recommend that you get a device. While they're not the same as a sleep lab, they allow you to really start to see and then think, well, when I do this, actually these things are more optimal. The other thing you can look at is when you do something like that, is you can start to see trends in your heart rate variability. So you'll see, have you really pushed, like in those end of quarter periods, how much are you pushing that it's sort of depressing those levels? But if you're consistently getting 8 hours, it's not an issue. But I think if you're sort of, some nights it's 11 till 7 and then other nights it's 2 till 7, that's when the health risks, as you see from that presentation, start to build up. It's when we drop below 6.5 hours. So trying to keep it within that minimum 6.5 to 7, and then getting 8 so that you're always within an hour of it is going to help to optimize those biological processes within the body.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. I hope that helps. But I wouldn't see at the moment a reason to really bring it dramatically further forward. The only caveat I'd make to that is there is some research that shows that when you go to bed by 10:30 p.m, it optimizes adrenal function. So if at any point stress is becoming more of an issue in your life, that's when I would then look at bringing that potentially further forward.
I did hear, and I don't know if it's like an old wives' tale, that 1 hour of sleep before midnight is worth 2 after midnight.
Yeah, and part of that is because, you know, where we're looking in the presentation, that from sort of 9 p.m. onwards, we prioritize that deep sleep, which is that deep repair. Whereas as you move into the early hours, it's predominating with REM sleep. So what can happen is that when you delay it post midnight, you're really shortening that deep sleep. Or if your body prioritizes differently and you get the deep, you wake up before you've had enough REM, which, as you can see, has a profound impact on health. So ideally for most people is going to be that classic 10:30 to 6:30 in the morning that they're getting that 8-hour window in.
Okay, thank you.
Sabrina, any tips from when a toddler wakes you up from a deep sleep? It's really, really hard because when you wake up like that, and I remember this happening a lot with mine, is you feel really groggy because you are in a deep sleep. It can feel really horrible. I would say that investing in some red light bulbs so that you're not putting any blue light on, because the more that you have any sort of blue light exposure, even walking to the toddler's room, the more you're waking up this hormonal system and introducing a rising cortisol that when you get back to bed can make it hard to go to sleep. So you can also buy like red light torches, for example, that shine, so you can shine the way to your toddler's room. It helps the toddler as well. And then when you come back, putting a sleep mask on, as soon as you start to deprive senses, you actually often will sleep better. So having a really good wraparound sleep mask, I really like the Mantis sleep masks because they have these built-out iPads, which means that you can comfortably open, while you're not going to look at anything because it's pitch black, comfortably sort of open and close your eyes. And they've recently brought out a silk or satin one because they used to be cotton. But you're not getting the same pressure because some people don't like the pressure of an eye mask. And also, if it isn't satin and it's quite close to the face, it can dry out the eye area, and any kind of eye serums and things that you're using, it's just absorbing that moisture. So it's more aging. That's the other thing with, like, while sleeping on the right side may increase blood flow, unless you have, there's pros and cons to everything, because in reality, in terms of aging and skin aging, sort of sleeping back like this on your back is going to be better. If you're sort of propped up on a pillow and you're like this, you're going to age your skin because you actually spend a long time in those positions. But I think limiting the inputs in terms of light will be one of the biggest things in that situation. And then trying to relax, because I always compare sleep is like falling in love. It comes on you. You can't, people talk about trying to go to sleep. You cannot try to go to sleep. One thing that does help is doing a breathwork practice, something very, very simple like the 2x breath. So you breathe in for 2, out for 2. When you get back to bed, then in for 3, out for 3, and then in for 4 and out for 4. Because as you do the out breath of 4, and you can even elongate that to 8, you start to drop that brainwave activity down into alpha, theta, and then into delta, which will help you get back into a deep sleep. So some of those things, I don't know if that's helpful, can help. And if you still here, Sabrina, can't see you, can't see everyone. Yeah.
Thanks a million.
Pleasure.
I actually have another question. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm working today, but I'm listening to you, and I'm
That's all right.
and I'm working. But sorry, I don't have my video on. My other question is, I really find if I'm doing any projects or, you know, trying to be creative or any ideas for work and stuff, that it's best like in the evening time. And when I did that DNA test, it came up that I was a night owl. So I don't know if that kind of links up with that or not.
Definitely.
But then if I keep working, like I'll do my work really fast and come up with my best ideas at nighttime, but then I'm just wired going to bed. So, you know, if I get into bed for 11, I'm just so wired from all that, you know, from the thinking and the creative ideas, but I don't get that creative in the morning time. So yeah, it's a tough one. If I want a good night's sleep, I have to miss out on, you know, some good ideas or something.
Yeah, it's a really tough one because with children, you're going to be woken up early regardless. You see, for an ideal world with you as a night owl, you would actually then optimize your work and things later. And it sounds like you like exercising later in the evening. So then you would be someone who'd be a really good candidate, for example, for fasting across the morning, getting up a bit later and really trying to optimize with your circadian rhythm. Whereas when you have children, that's very difficult to do. But what I would say is to still introduce a step change. Like last night, I've had so much work on recently. I was working, I don't normally do this, I was working till 11 o'clock at night. And I found it almost impossible to sleep last night because I hadn't had that separation. I was thinking, oh, it's going to be fine. I'm so tired. And I couldn't sleep. And so actually, the more that there's a very, very quickly developed neural association between your bed and the inability to sleep if you don't separate it. So the advice when I went to this presentation with Matthew Walker is that you don't lay in bed if you can't sleep. So actually in that scenario where you're quite wired, you would be better off doing something for an hour or so before you then go into the bedroom so that you're creating a much stronger neural association with the bedroom being a place to sleep. And even if you're getting less sleep and you know, for sometimes it's going to be a case of you may get 6.5 to 7 hours, for example, in that situation. But then at weekend, if you have a little bit of latitude within that extra hour that you can have without messing up the routine too much, that might help you. You can't catch up on sleep, so to speak. I think as well for you, you may find that an afternoon meditation practice helps to unlock more of that creativity and may bring it earlier just because of the profound impact of meditation on that right and left brain connectivity. And you may find that you get, if you did a post-lunch meditation, that you get some creative insights then. It would be something to kind of play around with and track.
Okay, thanks a million.
Does anyone else have any questions? I've got about 4 minutes till I have to run and get my daughter from ballet. So any other questions? Doesn't sound like it. Okay. Don't worry, they won't be all quite as long and detailed, but sleep is like quite a surprisingly big topic in itself. So cool. Doesn't sound like anyone's got questions. Obviously next Monday we will be doing coaching and Q&A. So as the weeks go on, you can like formulate any questions that you've got. If you want to message us in advance, you can send them to me, send them to Maura, send them to James. If you can't make a session, for example, but you want us to answer a question, so you've got the video of that back, it's always really helpful. If there's specific topics that you want us to cover at the beginning of those coaching sessions that happen on a Monday and do a short presentation on an area, if you can let us know by Friday, then we can make sure that by Monday evening, we can, you know, if it's anything we've had, for example, to look into, 9 out of 10, I'll be able to help you on the spot, but sometimes can't, then it's always helpful to know in advance. So really, as I say, we want to build this live element of the program around you. So just let us know and we're really here to help. Cool. All right, well, I'm going to go and catch the end of ballet. Thanks, Sharmina. Thanks, everyone. Really nice to see you all and have a great rest of your week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.